Hi friends, Dave Peterson here with davesguitarplanet.com. Today I'm going to talk about the 12 notes that all music is made from, but in a different kind of way than you might be used to. We all know C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. If I play it up the neck, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So there's 7 notes to a scale. And if I include the notes in between, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then it repeats. C sharp or D flat, D sharp or E flat, E, etc. Well, that's useful when you're playing with a band and you want to know what key you're playing in. You know, if the band's playing in C and you start playing in G, well, that's not going to work. But I find it a lot more useful to think of numbers. So to me, music isn't A, B, C, it's 1, 2, 3. So if we take the C scale, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is a lot more useful for me than C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. The reason is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C don't have any inherent feeling to them, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 do. Because I can go to a different key, say F here, and a 1 will always sound like a 1, and a 5 will always sound like a 5, and a flat 7 will always sound like a flat 7, etc. So today we're going to look at the 12 notes of the musical vocabulary and their personalities. We can use different adjectives, which are describing words, to talk about them. We can use spectrum from bright to dark would be one way to describe them, or clean to dirty sounding notes, or I like to say white to black. Some people might think it's controversial to say that, but I think there's, for me, certain kinds of music that are kind of white or come from classical music kind of feeling, which I associate more with European music, you know, white. And then there's the more gritty, and again, I don't mean to offend anybody with this, but I find that the music that came from the southern part of the states, that was the blues and the church music with more soul and grit, I find a little blacker. Or I can say too brownish, more earthy. Anyway, there's a lot of different words that we can apply, as we'll see. This is going to be more of an intermediate lesson, by the way, so if I go too fast, go take a look at my lessons on the major scale, etc. The 12 characters, I call them, or personalities. 1 or root, flat 2, 2, flat 3, 3, 4, sharp 4 or flat 5, 5, sharp 5 or flat 6, 6, flat 7, major 7, back to the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different notes. And the nice thing about music theory, calling the notes by numbers instead of by letters, is you can change to any key and it retains the feeling, as we'll see. I'm going to take these from the most basic to the most weirdest, or the ones that are kind of the hardest to hear. If you're a beginner or intermediate, the ones that we start with in the beginning, 1, 3, 5, are going to be the easiest, most immediate to be able to hear and use, and the farther extensions, the outside ones, might take your ear a little bit more time to get used to. So 1, do, re, mi, fa, sol, do, da, da, da. That's home bass, the most basic note that all the other notes are going to relate to. So if you didn't have a root, none of the other notes would have a place to compare to. So that's home bass. That's the safest note to use if you're soloing. And it's where a lot of melodies start and end. Okay, the next most basic interval I would say is the fifth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We call this in music theory the perfect fifth because we usually don't mess with it. When you do mess with it, we call it altering the chord, a flat 5 or a sharp 5. But a major chord, 1, 3, 5, has a 5 in it. The major 7 chord, 1, 3, 5, major 7. There's a 5 up here, has a 5 in it. A minor chord, 1, flat 3, 5, has a 5 in it. This voicing 1, 5, 1, flat 3, 5, 1. Minor 7, still got the 5 in there. The dominant 7 chord, we're talking about the 3 kinds of 7th chords if you've watched that video. C dominant 7 I'm playing here. This has a 5th in it. You can play it like this as well. 1, 5, 1. So the 2 most basic triads, major and minor, the only thing that changes is what kind of third you have, but the 5th stays the same. So it's part of a power chord. Some people even confuse it with the root. It's so fundamental and basic sounding. There's 2 kinds of several of the intervals. There's 2 kinds of 2. Here's the root, a major 2 and a flat 2. Some people call it a minor 2. I call it a flat 2. The third, there's 2 kinds of thirds, the major third and the minor third, the flat 3. And there's 2 kinds of 6s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The major 6 and the flat 6. Again, in classical music they might call it a minor 6, but major 6 and minor 6, flat 6. And the 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, major 7, half step from the root, and the flat 7. So some of these intervals, there's 2 kinds. Major 2, flat 2, major 3, flat 3, major 6, flat 6, major 7, flat 7. Okay, the next easiest interval for a lot of people to relate to is the major third. 1, 2, 3, 2 whole steps above the root. 1, 3, 5, or an octave higher. 1, 3, 5. That's the happy sounding 3. And very simple and bright and clean sounding. And then the flat 3 is the next interval that is darker and I might say a little dirtier. There are notes that you can bend. The flat 3 is one that you can bend. Let's do it in A. Reason is I can play an open A string here, and that's the new root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if I play an open root, and 1, 2, 3, there's the pretty 3, or the clean, happy 3, and here's the flat 3. See, I can bend that. It's much grittier and a little bit more emotional, I'd say, moodier, and you can bend it. So the notes that are in between the flat 3 and the major 3, there's different definitions of what a blues note is, but that's what I call a blues note, are the notes that are sort of in between that you can bend. Okay, the next interval that we can talk about would be going out the extensions. When we build chords, we go in odd numbers, 1, 3, 5. We've already covered those, so the next one is the major 7. It's kind of an odd interval because it's so close to the root. So we call it the leading tone, and it wants to pull back into the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I play it against the root here, just the two notes together sounds pretty dissonant. But it's funny if I add a major 3, 1, 2, 3, and a 5. So 1, 3, 5, major 7. Here's the major 7. So here it sounds pretty. And it's kind of odd because if we play the root and the major 7 only, it's a little dissonant, but in the context. So that's the pretty, a little bit prissy interval to me. If I play a little melody like think of the Carpenters. I call these girly chords. Here's the major 7. Very different from the other 7, which is the flat 7. 1, 3, 5, flat 7. Okay, the flat 7 is the bluesy, funky 7. Again, here's our root. So the major 7 and the flat 7. Flat 3, bend. I can bend it up to a major 3. Now it becomes kind of pretty and safe sounding, but down here it's dirtier and grittier. And the flat 7 is another note that we can bend, so I can bend that up to a root. Or take this flat 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and a half step above 6, flat 7. Here's the major 7, flat 7. Bend a flat 7 up to a root. So used a lot in blues and funk. There's the flat 7, or very funky, bluesy character or personality to it. The next one, going out the odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, major 7 or flat 7, 9. So when we go above 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 is the same as 2 because 8 is the same as 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So when we take 7th chord, 1, 3, 5, major 7, 9. You can make a major 9 chord like this with the pretty 7. And here's the 9. So as we add the higher extensions, we get a more sophisticated sound. Triads, 1, 3, 5, are 3-note chords, the most basic chord. And when we add a 7, 1, 3, 5, 7, we've got 4 notes, so a little bit more sophistication or complexity. And when we add the next odd number, a 9, we get even more complexity or sophistication. Let's see if I can do this. 1, 3, 5, major 7, 9. Okay. That would be a kind of a close voicing major 9 chord. Here's a easier guitar grip. If we take the major 7 and flat it, get the funky 7, here's a dominant 9. So that's what we call the flat 7 in a chord. The dominant 7, dominant 9. Much bluesier, funkier. Another common grip or voicing would be this one up here. So just adds a little more sophistication, a little more complexity. The next interval out is the 11. 1, 3, 5, major 7 or flat 7, 9, 11. So 11 is the same as 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 11 is, or a 4, if we call it the 4, it's the perfect 4. And like a fifth, we don't often mess with it. So the other intervals, again, there are minor counterparts. The 2 has a flat 2, the 3, flat 3, 6, flat 6, 7, flat 7. But the 4 and the 5, we don't have a minor 5 or a minor 4. These intervals we call perfect because they're so strong. Because the 4 is just a half step from the 3, we don't usually use them both on the same chord. So if you have an 11 chord, theoretically would be 1, 3, 5, say flat 7, 9, 11. So if we have the 3 and the 4 at the same time, that's too dissonant. So when we play an 11th chord, we omit the 3, we drop that out. So here's one grip for the guitar. This is actually, we can call a suspended 7 chord because there's no 9 in the chord. 1, 5, flat 7, 11, or suspended 4, 5, 1. And the 4 wants to resolve back down to the 3. If we play a full 11 chord, well, because there's only 6 strings on the guitar and I only have 4 fingers to fret with, it's a bit hard, but on the piano it's easier. But 1, flat 3, 9, 11. Here I can play the upper voices, omitting the major 3rd and the 5th. So this is a common 11 grip. I can put another flat 7 on top there. Or if I play this, easiest chord on the guitar is also an A11 chord. 1, 11, flat 7, 9, 5. The 4th is sort of a suspended or up in the air sound. If you stack them, from here to here's a 4th, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here to here's a 4th, here to here's a 4th. A stack of 4ths has this sort of modern sound. If you get into a modal harmony or chordal harmony, you start to sound like Miles Davis or Steely Dan or some of the modern jazz stuff. So the next interval to look at would be the 6 in its upper version, the 13. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 6 and 13 are the same. If we take a major chord, we can add a 6 to it and make a major 6 chord. It's got a 1, a 3, a 5, and a 6. Used a lot in country music and Hawaiian music. I think the 6 is kind of wholesome sounding or clean and adds another color to a major chord. Here's another 6 voicing, 1, 5, 6, 3. But when we add the other odd numbers beneath it, 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 11, 13. Well, when we play a 13 chord, we don't play the 11. So here's a common grip for a dominant 13 chord with the flat 7. 1, flat 7, major 3, 13. You can put a 9 by barring your little finger on top. So the 13 is as high as you go. You've run out of numbers now. We got 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 11, 13. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes. That's all the notes in a scale. Okay, let's take a look at the ones that we've skipped over. We talked about the 9. which is the same as a 2, but we didn't talk about the flat 2. The flat 2 is just a half step above the root. It's used in the Phrygian scale, if you know that scale. Kind of Spanish sounding. If I play an open root here. You can kind of hear how the flat 2 gives it sort of that Spanish feel. I don't use the flat 2 that much, and the Phrygian mode is not used that much, but some of the heavy metal guys like it, and it's a cool sounding mode. The next flat interval would be the flat 6. If you know your modes, here's a Dorian mode. The Dorian mode has a 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, major 6, flat 7. But if we take this major 6 and flat it, now it's slightly darker sounding. And that's called the natural minor scale, or Aeolian mode. And I prefer the Dorian mode. Just the major 6 is just a little brighter, and the flat 6 is a little bit darker. To review, there's a root, a 5th, a major 3rd, a flat 3rd, a major 7. There's the major 7, root, major 7, the flat 7, flat 7, the 9 or 2, the 4 or 11. We call it the suspended 4. You know this voicing. Suspended 4, resolving to 3, because they're right next to each other. It wants to pull back down to the 3. The major 6 in country music and Hawaiian music. Take a ukulele and play this voicing. 1, 5, major 6, 3. The flat 6 in the Aeolian mode. Right above the 5th. Okay, and then the flat 2 from the Phrygian mode. The very last interval is, if you take the 5th and you flat it, or take the 4 and raise it, you get this note. So if I play an A root, 1, 2, 3, 4, sharp 4. Here's another root, 1, sharp 4. We call this the tritone. So this is the most exotic or the weirdest interval, the 12th of those I'm talking about today. 1, if you go a whole step to 2, a whole step to 3, and another whole step. So you got 1, 2, 3 whole steps. Whole step can also be called a tone, a whole tone. So 1 tone, 2 tones, 3 tones. A tritone. I used to call this the French police car tone. It's the most dissonant of all the intervals. So that's why we don't use it very often. It's also in the blues scale, but it's not a note that you camp out on. The difference between the minor pentatonic and the blues scale, you might know. Minor pentatonic, 1, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7, 1. The only difference between that and a blues scale is this passing tone. So I don't really like to talk about the blues scale very much because it's just the minor pentatonic with this passing tone. You wouldn't camp out on that note very much if you're playing a minor blues. You might go up to it and back, or you might bend to it. Another blues note there, or go past it. But you wouldn't camp out on it too much. It's too dissonant. The tritone. So there you go. There's the 12 personalities, or the 12 characters that you're going to be playing around with, the 12 guys that are going to be your bread and butter if you're a working musician. I hope you got something out of it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and check out davesguitarplanet.com. I'll see you next time.